You've probably heard it 1,000 times. Venezuela has the largest proven oil reserves on the entire planet. Bigger than Saudi Arabia, bigger than anyone. It's one of those things we just know. But what if that number, that universally accepted fact, isn't really a fact at all? All right, so how are we going to unpack all this? Well, first, we're going to tackle that 300 billion barrel myth head on. Then we need to get really clear on what the word reserve actually means. From there, we'll uncover the one single number that changes the whole equation and see how that figure became a powerful tool of propaganda. And finally, after we apply a crucial economic filter, we're going to rebuild the list and see who really comes out on top. Okay, so first up, let's look at the claim itself. You gotta understand, this isn't just some number on a spreadsheet. For more than a decade, this figure has literally shaped geopolitics, global markets, and the identity of an entire nation. And yeah, you've definitely seen a chart that looks a lot like this one. This particular one is from Statista using BP's data. And for years, this was pretty much gospel. There's Venezuela right at the top with 304 billion barrels. Saudi Arabia is a distant second. Looks pretty cut and dry, right? Well, almost immediately, things get complicated. You have experts like Julian Salazar Velasquez writing in Petroleum Egg, who flat out call it a colossal fraud. His take? It's basically a legend, built on the old idea that if you repeat a lie often enough, people will start to believe it's true. So to figure out what's really going on, we have to get our definitions straight. And this whole story hinges on one single word: reserve. And trust me, it's a lot more specific than just oil that's in the ground. So check this out. According to the pros, we're talking about groups like the Society of Petroleum Engineers, all the oil in the ground starts out in this giant bucket called original oil in place. But the part that actually gets to be called a proven reserve, it's just a tiny, very specific slice of that whole pie. And here is the absolute key. For any oil to earn that proven reserve label, it has to pass 3 really important tests. First, you have to be reasonably certain you can get it out. Second, you have to be able to make money doing it at today's prices. And third, you have to be able to do it with technology that exists and is working right now. It's all about the here and now. And this is where the whole story just completely pivots. Because that giant 300 billion barrel claim, it didn't come from some massive new oil discovery. Nope. It came from changing one single, very controversial number in a math equation. So let's follow the math. Analyst Diego J. Gonzalez Cruz, pulling from the state oil company PDVSA's own figures, tells us the starting point. It's this absolutely mind-boggling estimate of the total oil in the Oronoko Belt, 1.36 trillion barrels. Now, to get from that giant number to a reserve, you apply something called a recovery factor. Basically, how much of it do you think you can realistically get out? And the number they chose was 20%. But here's the catch. Even PDVSA said this was a goal, something they hope to achieve in the future with advanced technology that wasn't widely in use. And this is where you can really see the problem in black and white. As Gonzalez Cruz points out, before 2010, the standard, more technically grounded recovery factor that PDVSA itself used was just 4.1%. So jumping from 4.1 all the way to 20, that wasn't a reflection of reality. It was a huge, unproven leap of faith. So that begs a pretty big question, right? If the number was based on a future hope and not a current reality, why would you announce it to the entire world like it was a hard fact? Well, if you look at the sources, including analyses published in journals like Radelic, the timing was everything. This announcement happened right around 2010, just as their actual oil production was starting to fall off a cliff. So this massive reserve number, it was a strategic move to project strength, to try and lure in foreign investment, and to give them more leverage within OPEC. Economist Rafael Quiros had the perfect term for this. He called them reservas de papel, paper reserves. And he had this great line: "De nada sirve tener el petróleo abajo si no tienes el taladro arriba." It basically means, what good is having all that oil underground if you don't have the drill rigs on top to get it out? The value was on paper, not in the pipeline. And that brings us to the final and maybe the most important filter that any resource has to pass before it can be considered a real bankable reserve. You see, according to strict standards like those from the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, reserves must be economically producible. And for much of Venezuela's oil, which is extra heavy and sludgy, that's a huge hurdle. It costs a ton of money to extract and upgrade, the infrastructure has been deteriorating for years, and the legal framework has often scared away the very investment needed to get it out of the ground. And get this, even the certification firm seemed wary. In a key quote reported by Bloomberg, the president of Ryder Scott, Herman Acuna, essentially said that the numbers his firm was calculating and the numbers being announced by the government weren't always the same thing. He suggested they were blurring the line between what was truly proven and what was just speculative. So, if we strip away the wishful thinking, apply those strict definitions, and factor in the cold, hard economic reality, where does Venezuela actually stand in the global energy ranking? Well, when independent analysts rerun the numbers using the same standardized commercial criteria for everybody, the leaderboard gets a major shakeup. This chart reflects estimates from experts like Francisco Monaldi at the Baker Institute, and yeah, Venezuela's place on that list looks very, very different. So, just how big is that change? According to an analysis from the firm Rystad Energy, which applies those strict international standards, Venezuela's economically recoverable reserves could be as low as 60 billion barrels. Now, don't get me wrong, that is still a massive amount of oil, but it's less than a fifth of that official figure we always hear about. Ultimately, I think this whole story shows us that the biggest number isn't always the most important one. The real challenge for any nation rich in resources isn't just about the geology deep underground. It's about building the technology, the transparency, and maybe most of all, the trust on the surface needed to turn that potential into real, tangible wealth.